The prerequisites to complete this analysis are the following. Read Chapter 2, Factual Information, pages 13 to 22, and Chapter 4, Analysis, pages 39 to 46. Remember that detailed information to perform the analysis is available in the Guidance for Analysts. To help you with your analysis, we recommend that you start by looking at the table of content of the report to recognize the sections that will facilitate the identification of the threats, errors, and the weak pilot competencies. Generally, you will find the threats, errors, and weak competencies under the Analysis section and Factual Information section of the reports. Here are some examples of content found in the Factual Information section. History of the flight, flight crew or personnel information, meteorological information, aerodrome information, aircraft information, etc. We remind you that before using the analyst's tool, you need to have a good understanding of the contributing factors of the accident incident. This is only possible by reading the relevant sections of the report. Using the tool, select all threats, errors, and pilot competencies that you have identified as contributing factors to the accident incident. If you do not identify the threat or the error in the report, please click Not Applicable. This is a mandatory function to avoid any unintentional omissions. If you identify a threat or an error which is not proposed in the tool, you must add it under Other Threats or Other Errors in the comment box. If not, leave it blank. When identifying the weak pilot competencies, your options are only yes or no. Each of the 9 pilot competencies will require an answer. In the evening of June 6, 2010, a Boeing 737-4B6, operated by Royal Air Maroc, left Amsterdam Schiphol Airport to its destination of Nador International Airport in Morocco. During the takeoff from runway 18 left, the aircraft collided with a flock of geese, which resulted in a left engine failure. The crew declared an emergency and planned the immediate return to Schiphol Airport. The aircraft had difficulties to climb, flew at low altitude over a build-up area, and passed multiple high obstacles. The flight crew ultimately landed the aircraft safely, and no passengers or crew members sustained injuries. The incident investigation was conducted by the Dutch Safety Board. Let's now practice using the tool. Select the date of occurrence of the accident incident, not the date of issuance of the report. Normally, the report will have a reference number that is easy to find on the cover page. However, in the Amsterdam incident, the report didn't have a reference number. Therefore, we used the project number 20100034. Normally, the severity is found on the cover page of the report. However, in this case, the information was found on page 5. It was classified as a serious incident. Hence, in the tool, we select Incident, including Serious Incident. Please note that all these sections are also mandatory. Phase of flight. Aircraft generation. For the aircraft type, please use the drop-down menu. For region of the world, note that we refer to the place where the accident incident occurred. Please note that we will not go through all the threats and errors in the tool. We will focus on the ones that were identified as contributing factors in this incident or the ones which we want to bring your attention to. In the tool, the first threat is meteorology. As an analyst, you must establish if the meteorology has been a contributing factor to the incident. By reading the report, you shouldn't have found any indication of a meteorological threat, and this is confirmed under section 2.9 in the report. From this extract, it is obvious that meteorology was not a contributing factor to the incident, so you must select Not Applicable in the tool. In this case, there is no doubt that birds have been an environmental threat. Therefore, you click Yes in the tool. When considering the aircraft malfunction threats, it is obvious that you select Contained Engine Failure, which is the result of the bird strike. But what about the landing gear? You may be tempted to select landing gear, tires as well. But let's have a look at the next slide. In your opinion, was landing gear malfunction a threat? If you limit your reading to the history of the flight, you may think that there was a landing gear malfunction. The captain thought that the nose landing gear was unable to retract. When reading the Chapter 4 analysis, the investigation reveals that the nose gear sensor was damaged, causing a false nose gear indication which disturbed the pilots. Because this specific malfunction is not provided in the tool, you must write it in Aircraft Malfunction System Other. In this case, we propose the wording as shown on the slide. The report doesn't seem to implicate any psychological, physiological threat in the incident. But as an analyst, you may ask yourself if fatigue has been a contributing factor. The personnel information section can provide indication as to whether or not the pilots could have been fatigued. When you look at the pilot's schedule, you see that they had regular working hours in the 72 hours prior to the incident. Furthermore, the report does not indicate that the pilots demonstrated any signs of threats B02, B03 and B04. Therefore, you must select Not applicable in the tool. Now that you have completed the identification of threats, the next step is to look at the errors. The first error in the tool is aircraft handling. You must identify if an aircraft handling error has been a contributing factor to the incident. You find in multiple instances in the report that the captain had difficulty to maintain the flight path using manual control. This extract is only one example. Other statements related to speed and altitude deviations and power settings are mentioned in the report. Therefore, you select Manual Handling Flight Controls in the tool. Now moving on to the Procedural Errors SOP compliance. In the report, you can find many intentional and unintentional errors. In order to illustrate this, we selected these two extracts. The trajectory change was an obvious intentional error from the captain because he stated that the immediate return to Amsterdam was necessary. Another intentional error is the extension of the gear during the takeoff phase. An example of unintentional error is when the crew reduced the thrust after only 2 minutes, when the limitation permits to maintain maximum thrust for 5 minutes. Therefore, you must select intentional and unintentional in the tool. To determine if the crew made a checklist error, either normal or abnormal, you must refer to the analysis section of the report. You will find that the flight crew performed the normal checklists properly. Page 39 states that the pilots correctly completed the standard operating procedures up until takeoff. However, the abnormal checklists were not done properly. Among others, the crew did not perform the one-engine inoperative landing procedure. Therefore, you must select Abnormal Checklist in the tool. The following extracts clearly indicate that the communication errors were made. Therefore, you must select communication errors with ATC, cabin crew and pilot to pilot. Now that you have completed the identification of threats and errors, the next step is to look at the pilot competencies. In the next slides, a few report extracts are provided to demonstrate which competencies have been weak countermeasures against the threats, errors, and undesired aircraft state. Generally, the weak competencies are directly named in the report because they are part of the investigation's findings. Nevertheless, your analysis will permit to identify additional weak competencies by making the link between report statements and associated observable behaviors. For the rest of the tutorial, we may use the abbreviation OBs instead of observable behaviors. From this extract on page 45, you can clearly and easily identify 5 of the weak competencies. These are situational awareness and management of information, workload management, leadership and teamwork, application of procedures and compliance with regulations, and communication. However, by further reading the report, you will identify additional weak competencies. When reading pages 19 and 41 of the report, you find clear indications of an additional weak competency related to the aeroplane flight path management manual control. When looking at these two extracts, you notice deficiencies in OBs 4.2 and 4.3. OB 4.2 is deficient because the flight crew did not correct the flight path. and OB 4.3 is deficient because the crew struggled with the thrust, altitude, and airspeed. When reading pages 40 and 44 of the report, you find clear indications of an additional weak competency related to the problem-solving and decision-making. When looking at these two extracts, you notice deficiencies in OBs 6.1, 6.3, and 6.9. OB 6.1 and 6.3 are deficient because when encountering the bird strike, the pilots acted in an impulsive manner instead of having a structured approach to the situation. And OB 6.9 is deficient because the captain demonstrated a lack of resilience by immediately deviating from the flight path right after the bird strike, even though instruments were stable. Now that you have completed the identification of the weak competencies as countermeasures, you select Yes in the tool for situational awareness and management of information, workload management, leadership and teamwork, application of procedures and compliance with regulations, problem-solving and decision-making, aeroplane flight path management, manual control, and communication. Since two competencies were not clearly identified, you select No for aeroplane flight path management, automation, and application of knowledge. Please remember that the competencies' observable behaviors are the objective measurements that will help you establish if a competency was weak. The final step of the analysis is to assess the training effect. You must evaluate the potential effect of FSTD training in preventing or mitigating the severity of the event. If you consider that the event is trainable in FSTD, the training effect increases in accordance with the number of weak competencies identified. This principle is summarized in the table on the left side of the slide. During the analysis of this incident, you have identified 7 weak competencies, and you certainly consider that this event can be trained in FSTD. Therefore, you select High Effect in the tool. This report is rather lengthy and is not representative of the majority of the reports that you will analyze. It has been chosen because it involves multiple threats, errors, undesired aircraft states, and competencies. We now invite you to watch a 4-minute video that provides an overview of the analyst's tool. Thank you for completing this tutorial.